Shalom Baraka, Mishpaka, peace and blessings, family. In this video, I will basically be breaking down a lot of things found written in this book, Civilization and the Ancient Egyptians by Katanga Ebongo. Katanga Ebongo is indeed an African himself. He's an African author and scholar. And the things that he put in this book is very astonishing. I basically skimmed through this book and, just to find whatever I could find that's pretty interesting. So this is the first thing I found. The idea that it was Europeans who introduced civilization to Africa is one of the biggest historical myths. In fact, evidence from archaeology, oral history, traditional languages, and cultural practices strongly indicate that it was the South American Indians who introduced civilization to Africa.
Guyana, Mr. Herman Jessen, the Amazon trader, makes his way up the Moroni River, aided by friendly natives, the primitive Indians along its banks, for their spears, baskets, and primitive artifacts, and often has to eat only what nature provides.
This little boy is one of the sons of the Bushmen, and I gave him a piece of chewing gum, and that's what he did with it. He couldn't figure it out. To pole our way into this. In another part of the village, we see one of the girls fixing the hair of a lady chief of the village. This is another little baby of Tutu, and the girl is winnowing rice into this native Boni Bushman village. And the paddle I'm trading here with these Bushmen. One of the native girls brought us some fruits, and we are trading it for this empty oil can.
What?
Shoving off on our way now to the next Boni village of Assisi. And you see the way these boys are built with their shoulders and muscles, that they really are good for this type of work.
They're very stocky people, Mr. Jessen.
Oh yes, they're very healthy, and they're really children of nature. The language is Taki-Taki. It's a language of about 300 words. I learned to respect these people. I never lost anything on the whole trip.
For a very long amount of time, before the flood, humanity lived all around Pangaea. Then during the flood, it was only Noah and his family on the ark. Noah lived in Florida because gopher wood grew in Florida. He built the ark out of gopher wood in Florida. The ark went from Florida to Arat, Turkey. They then got out of the ark and they stood on Turkish ground in Turkey. They then moved from the east, migrating west through Europe, making it into Newfoundland, Canada. And then when they made it to Canada, they built the Tower of Babel. After the Tower of Babel, they were scattered throughout the earth. The children of Cush scattered themselves throughout the Americas, but specifically and mainly in South America. But see, the Kushite Empire was built on both sides of the Gihon. So you had Kushite Empire in America and Kushite Empire in Africa. And when it separated, those South American Indians, because they came from South America and built empire in Africa, started to split off because the waters began to separate the land masses. Yahuwah wanted to make sure mankind would never get together again to rebel against Yah. But side note, that's what the elites are trying to do right now with this new world order. This one world religion, this one world currency. They're all trying to get together with the purposes of doing wickedness. And when that starts to go through, that's when Yahuwah will completely destroy again. All right, but let's get back on topic. The American Indians that he's referring to are the children of Cush, who lived in South America and crossed the Gihon River which became the South Atlantic Ocean when the continent split. So the children of Kush split off, some in Africa and some in America. You understand? So this is what he's talking about right here. It says right here, one of history's biggest myths is that civilization started in the Middle East. You know how I like to say Mesopotamia was the beginning of human civilization. Now look at this. African oral history and archaeological evidence suggests that civilization began in South America. The exact time frame in which human civilization started in South America is difficult to establish. But let's talk about this. In South America, right, we have pyramids and structures that are still being discovered to this day by LiDAR technology, some of which date back way before the ziggurats of Mesopotamia were built and before the pyramids of modern Egypt were built as well. So with that being said, yeah, of course, obviously South American civilization is far older than Middle Eastern or African civilization for that matter. Let's continue to look at what I highlighted. Pay attention to this part. The South American Indians are the only people who ever built pyramids. This includes the pyramids that we see in Africa. This includes the pyramids that we see in India. You know what I'm saying? Pyramids all around the world, because the American Indians traveled around the world. And so, in fact, the Mayans traveled to India at one point, crossing the Pacific Ocean, making it to the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and India, greatly influencing the society, introducing religion. And there's literally a god from the Mayan religion that the Hindus also worship, right? There's a lot of correlations between India and the Mayans. For example, the Mayans, in fact, discovered the number 0, and they introduced that to the Indians. They introduced the Pythagorean theorem to the Indians. And they also, when I say the Indians, I'm talking about the East Indians, not the West Indians. I'm talking about the East Indian, the Indian, country, the country of India, right? The Hindustan, as what it was called originally. So there was a connection between the Mayan culture and the Hindustanian culture. In fact, the Mayan culture brought a lot of things to the Hindus, including corn, right? And that's why you see Hindu gods and goddesses with corn in their hands, because the Mayans introduced corn to the other side of the world. And they also taught them how to build pyramids. And they also intermingled with the people. This is why we can see the correlations between Mayan artwork and Hindu artwork. And we can see Hindu artwork in the Americas and things of that nature. But that's besides the point. But the point I'm just trying to make is, all the pyramids around the world have one source, and that is the American Indians. They are the ones that had that technology to construct such things. And this was an anti-gravity frequency technology. You got to understand, we think we're at the height of advanced technology. That's false. We are, look, let me explain something to you. This is how discoveries happen. They don't happen like, oh, all humans are dumb and they just go get smarter and smarter and now they're all the way at the top. It doesn't work like that. It moves in ripples. You have high points and low points. You have times where civilization is extremely stupid and times where it's extremely smart, and then information is lost. Then they're stupid again. Then they start learning. Then it gets back up. Happens throughout history. Now, because of wars and conquering and burning things down, history gets lost all the time, and we just continue to relearn it. Things like floods and fires and natural disasters, of course, also help in eradicating technology, knowledge, and advancements. So we have to relearn things, and this has happened throughout human history. So, but there was a time that was far more advanced than today. They had anti-gravity levitation frequency technology. And they learned this directly from the gods, just as we learn things from the gods today. When I say gods, I'm talking specifically about angels, most of which are fallen angels, or the angels specifically assigned to that given nation of people or bloodline of people. Now, the elites today, through NASA, ever since the 1990s, have been communicating with fallen angels through the means of inducing death by stopping the heart and interacting throughout the spiritual realm, connecting to the spiritual realm. And they began to talk to these entities. And this is how they came out with Microsoft computers and smartphones and radios and this and that. And, you know, all this stuff was learned by the fallen angels. And, you know, technology has always been taught to us by the fallen angels. You know what I'm saying? But let's read this. It says, contrary to popular belief, the pyramids were built with the use of some form of technology. It appears that ancient South Americans had figured out how to overcome gravity. When they figured out how to overcome gravity, there was a lot of excitement. Pyramid building was more about showcasing their mastery over gravity than about putting up a building. Boulders were first manufactured and allowed to dry in the sun. The dry, strong boulders were then hoisted into place using the anti-gravity technology. The technology behind the boulder making and hoisting has been lost to humanity. All attempts to identify this ancient technology has not been successful. This is partly due to the fact that pyramid building was a deeply religious activity. Only a few people selected by the gods learned the technology. And this correlates, he's not just making up stuff. This correlates to the same studies that I've been coming across. There's no way you can lift a 40-ton block any way physical with any type of machinery or any type of animal or any type of anything. If the limestone which they got the blocks from came miles and miles away, how did they source it? It had to be levitated. There's no other way. Another great invention of ancient South Americans was the art of boat building and sailing. That includes the Mayans, like I just mentioned, how they sailed across, you know, to India and introduced to them their, you know, mathematics. The Indians then introduced to the Arabs mathematics, where we have, this is where we get the Arabic numerals from, and the Arabic numerals carried over into Greece, and also don't forget Egypt, modern Egypt. Where did they get their technology from? They got their technology from the Americas. Remember, the American Indians settled in Africa, and they brought technology and knowledge to Northeast Africa, Egypt, and they already known about the mathematics. Now, through the Indians who learned from the Mayans and the Egyptians who learned from the American Indians, the Greeks got their knowledge, which passed down to Rome, which passed down to us today. The same mathematics that we're learning in school can be traced back to American civilizations. Now I want to talk about this. The wheel. The wheel is one of the greatest inventions in human history. It was the South American Indians who invented the wheel. In present times, a lot has been said about inventing the wheel. However, the fact that the wheel was invented in South America is hardly ever mentioned. The South American Indians invented this. The South Americans invented the wheel shortly after they had perfected the art of sailing. At the beginning, the wheel was invented for fishing purposes. A spiked wheel was used to trap fish. By the time South American Indians came to North Africa, they had already invented the spiked wheel trap. They introduced the trap to the Africans at the start of ancient Egypt. In present times, the early spiked wheel trap can be found in constant use among the indigenous South American Indian tribes. In Africa, the spiked wheel trap is still being used by the African tribes of the Upper Nile to the north of Lake Victoria. So what do we see about this? The wheel was invented by South American Indians, and it was used for fishing purposes originally. And they still, Africa and in South America, they use the same spiked wheel trap. Now we're talking about chariots. When South Americans first came to Africa, they had already invented chariots, and llama-drawn chariots were common in South America. These llama-drawn chariots were introduced to Africa and were used to transport the pharaoh, the priest, and the pyramid builders. Now, it's a lot of things that we can take from this. Now, everything about American history has completely been changed, especially after 1846. They want you to believe that all American Indians since the beginning of time have been people wearing grass skirts and feathers and just running around, shooting and eating rabbits and living in the woods and doing nothing else. They don't want you to know that these were actually the most advanced society on earth. They don't want you to know they had chariots. They don't want you to know they had domesticated goats and cows either. Because when they tell you this, it ruins the whole narrative. And then when you realize they're lying so much about America, you can only question why. Why would they put in so much energy into simply lying about American history? Maybe because they know that American history is the history of us all, and it's the beginning, and it's Atlantis. And in Atlantis contains the Holy Land mentioned in the scriptures, as well as the biblical Egypt, biblical Assyria, biblical Babylon, biblical Sodom and Gomorrah, biblical everything, all the places found in the Bible, well, specifically Old Testament, can also be attributed to North, Central, and South America. Now, let's pay attention to the word pharaoh. I like that he put pharaoh, because not only did Africans have a pharaoh, the South Americans also had a pharaoh, but they called it a paro. And in Hebrew, the word pharaoh is paro. And the O in Hebrew is interchangeable with the U. Therefore, there's a strong possibility that the word Peru just simply means the land of the pharaoh, because Peru is the latest, newest Egyptian society in the world. It kept going until 1532 with ruling empires, pyramids, exceeding gold, and all kinds of other things of that nature. It was the South American Indians who introduced the idea of cultivation to Africa. So farming itself came from the South American Indians, right? More than 90% of African traditional dishes originated in South America. Now it starts to name all the plants that come from South America. More than 90% of all African dishes originated in South America. Then it starts to name the plants that came from South America: pepper, cola nut, corn, millet, yam, sweet potato, cocoa yam, pumpkin, squash, gourd, black-eyed peas, peanuts, okra, pineapple, cocoa, plantain, banana, tobacco, palm nut, coconut, ginger, garlic, sugarcane, tomato, onion, and cotton, right? The South Americans also introduced goat, hen, guinea hen, and dog to Africa. So let's pay attention to something. All these plants and even animals that we see in South America, that we see in Africa today, come from South America. Now, let's pay attention to goat, the domesticated goat. They're going to say that originated in Mesopotamia or something. But, and they'll also tell you that America, they never had domesticated anything other than a dog. They'll tell you, they'll give you a dog. They'll say, yeah, the American Indians, they had domesticated dogs. Yeah, they did. But they're not going to tell you about any domesticated goats, cows, or horses that we did have throughout the Americas. They'll tell you about llamas. Yeah, we'll give you llamas. But they won't tell you about camels, domesticated camels that we had throughout the Americas. I can show you paintings from the 15 and 1600s. In fact, there's a painting from 1674 of, it's a drawing. And it's people with a camel. That's a camel, not a llama. They had camels and llamas. A cow and a goat. These are American Indians using these for work and labor. They tell you that these animals never existed in the Americas. Now we know that throughout North America, the only wild oxen that we have, other than the musk ox of Canada, is the bison. Whether it be the wood bison or the prairie bison, this is the only type of wild ox that we have throughout inhabitable American continent. However, if you want to domesticate a bison, the domesticated bison over time would be this very species of cow that is in this drawing. If you want to take a goat out the mountains and domesticate it, it would be the type of goat in this drawing. If you want to domesticate a camel and breed it to look different over time, it will turn into a llama. So these are things that we must understand, especially the fact that a llama is just a breed of camel, a humpless camel. Because you can breed a camel to not rely on a hump. Humps are for desert. If the camel does not live in the desert, it therefore does not need a hump. You have camels in the rainforest of South America. What does it need a hump for? It turns into a llama. It's still a camel. It just goes by another name. Do you understand? By the 15th century AD, the North American Indians were the most advanced and most prosperous people in the world. Now that's the North American Indians, you understand? And 15th century, that's the 1400s. Now it took a while for the Europeans to basically take over North America. It was pretty swift to take Mexico, South America, and colonize the islands. But why did it take so long to basically conquer from the Appalachians to California? Manifest Destiny didn't happen until 1845. They didn't start looking at Utah, Nevada, and California until 1845. And why is that? But they didn't know what to do with the remains of their civilizations. Great temples, pyramids, large buildings, schools, places of worship just sitting out in the open. It wasn't until 1845 that Europeans could actually live on those sides because it was restricted. The US government restricted people from living on that area. Europeans made claims on the land. The Spanish, they made claims on land, but they never lived in the land. Because they were doing things. They were trying to get rid of things. They were trying to hide things. They were blowing things up. They were stealing things. They were moving things. Manifest destiny was what they thought God wanted them to do, to move west. Why would they bring God into it? Why would they think God wanted them to move west? You know, it's things of that nature that you have to question. Now, the main thing that you have to question is why are all artifacts of both ancient Egypt and ancient Israelite artifacts like the Mesha stele, right? Things of that nature, the Tel Dan stele. Why are all of these discovered after Manifest Destiny? Or during Manifest Destiny? You know what I'm saying? Things like that we got to think about. And then let us not forget about the mound builder, the great Assyrians. They didn't just vanish. That's nah. There were strategic things that happened in the North American continent that they do not want you to know. And then a lot of things in the West that they wanted you to completely not know about. And it wasn't until 1860, around the time where when the black slaves were being emancipated, Abraham Lincoln said, okay, you're free to live in the West. All of a sudden, he said to the U.S. citizens, all right, go ahead, you're free to live in the West. I'll let you buy some land in the West. Before that, only the South states and the East states were inhabited by U.S. citizens. But it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln that people started to live in California and Utah and Nevada. When I say people, I mean people who consider themselves United States citizens. The earliest whites that lived in those states were the Mormons, and the Mormons tell a completely different story than everybody else. They say that land is holy. Right? Don't they say that? They say that land is holy. They named everything biblical land. Even in Utah, we got Mount Nebo, Moab, Jericho, etc. Even got Jerusalem. They said this is the promised land. See how they try to erase history? Just like that. They tell you the Mormons are crazy. They're making up this stuff. But even to this day, Mormon belief has changed. Mormons don't even believe America is the promised land anymore. If you ask a Mormon, they'll say, oh no, they just came here. But the first Mormons believe that America is the promised land. The first Mormons believe that